Robert Crumb was one of the pioneers of the underground comics with an X, movement back in the 60s that really tapped into the counterculture of that era in America. And one of the most iconic characters that he created during that time was Fritz the Cat. Now, Fantagraphics has reprinted this volume, collecting all of the Fritz the Cat strips, dating back to before he was a well-known cartoonist, all the way to the end. Even after Fritz the Cat had his own movie by Ralph Bakshi in studio. Now, Robert Crumb wasn't the biggest fan of that movie. And actually, the reason why this is called The Life and Death of Fritz the Cat is because Robert Crumb was so disenfranchised with that movie that he actually took it upon himself to unalive one of his most iconic characters. You're going to want to take a look at this. It's a great compilation. It's a great way to view a cartoonist's talent and his output and his range from his young days all the way to his older days when he really perfected his style. All that's included in this thin trade paperback. I'm going to flip the camera around, put this under the microscope. Stay tuned and watch this video until the end. And we're back. My name is Taylor. This is Taylor Talks Comics. Thank you for joining me. Please give the video a thumbs up, comment down below with any of your thoughts throughout the duration of this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. I do lots of reviews on underground comics, on Robert Crumb, on Fantagraphics books, on independent comics, and even Marvel and DC. The whole gamut of the medium I like to explore on my channel. All right, so this is The Life and Death of Fritz the Cat. I'm pretty sure this is a exact one-to-one reprint of the previous edition. I don't think they've done anything differently here with this edition. You can see that it is a glossy cover. I'm trying to fight my ring light so you can see the full cover there. And then you can see how thin it is. This one does carry the new Fantagraphics logo on the bottom. And then here's the back with a blurb from Robert Crumb saying, "I can express something with animals that is different from what I can put into my work about humans. I can put more nonsense, more satire, and fantasy into the animals." And then we open up and we get a title page here. We get a little bit of a short strip, silent strip of Fritz the Cat and one of his lady friends. And then we get a table of contents, and it just tells you what's collected on each page. And then that's it. As far as like any sort of back matter or historical context, there's none of that in here. It's all just kind of put together as far as just collecting the strips. And I would have liked some of that, maybe some back matter about Robert Crumb and the Ralph Bakshi movie and that kind of stuff. But I feel like Robert Crumb probably didn't even want that himself because he really wasn't a fan of the movie at all. But what you do get in here is a great exploration of a cartoonist from the early in their career to the later parts of their career, which I always love to see that progression. And typically with that progression, you have to see it across multiple books. Like the R. Crumb sketchbooks, you can notice it there from the beginning of first volume of that to later. Or if you're looking at any sort of cartoonist's earliest works to their later works. But here you really get to see it all the way through from beginning to end. And you see, these are his early strips. I think these came out in the early 60s, I want to say, is when he drew these. And you can see the pen. He's still using that pen. I don't even know if he's using pencil for these, to be honest, for these early strips. And laying inks over them. But he still has that maniacal kind of cross-hatching that we would eventually get with Robert Crumb, but it's not honed in as neatly and perfectly as he will eventually get. You get like the more wavier lines. Even the lettering itself is kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say sloppier, but it's sloppier compared to how perfect his lettering would become. And so it's interesting to see the progression of his artwork, and you get to see it literally beat by beat. Even the title lettering gets cleaned up and is like a lot better going on. You can see kind of, again, how wavier that one is versus how clean it would eventually become. And that was the most fascinating thing for me, was that I've read a lot of Robert Crumb comics, but typically it's each collection that I've read has been through one era, and I haven't been able to read through like the beginning era of his career to like, not the end of his career, because the last strip in here is the early 70s, so he'd still, I mean, he just came out with the comic book last year, so he still has 40 plus more years beyond that. But seeing those earliest years of a cartoonist, the earliest first part of the decade, is truly where you get that progression in a truly visible way. But I digress. That's all. All the kind of the making of this comic. Who is Fritz the Cat, though? There's been like talks whether or not he's a kind of a cartoony stand-in, like anthropomorphic stand-in of Robert Crumb himself. And there's been people that have said like that's not the case. I think Robert Crumb himself has said that's not the case. But I feel like he kind of is, just based on reading the autobio comics I have of Robert Crumb. I feel like he is like an over-the-top cartoonish version of Robert Crumb. Now, the things that he does, I don't think Robert Crumb would do. I think maybe they were kind of like his cartoonish fantasies of what he would like to do, potentially. I don't know. But there is some parallels between the characters, I would say. And he's definitely this cat that is definitely... this is not for children, even though it is a cartoony animal. If you watch the Ralph Bakshi movie, you definitely can see that. That was one of the first mature animated features ever, to be honest. Ralph Bakshi himself cites that as kind of being what would become The Simpsons and Adult Swim and Family Guy, those kinds of things. Started off with Fritz the Cat, where he wanted to make an animated feature for grown-ups. And I personally have seen the movie, and I feel like the depiction of the character is pretty spot on. I think the animation is beautiful by Ralph Bakshi, one of the great animators of all time. I think that it looks like ripped right out of the pages of a Robert Crumb comic. And some of the lines of the movie are ripped directly out of this comic. I'd seen the movie before and I read the comic before, but I never as closely together as I have now, because I watched the movie in preparation for this video after having just read this. So I don't know if it's just one of those things where Robert Crumb is an artist that doesn't like to see his things adapted. You know, we've seen this like with Alan Moore and his comics. He doesn't like to see his stories adapted. And that's perfectly fine by an artist. By all means, you can feel that way. But I really thought this was the animated feature was pretty spot on. Now here's the last story. This is Fritz the Cat Superstar, and you can see when I was comparing the artwork. Let's just do a quick little flip back and forth here to the earliest story to the later story. It still has that maniacal kind of cross-hatching I was talking about, but it's much cleaner. The panel borders are much cleaner. The lettering is much cleaner, and the cross-hatching itself looks a lot. You can delineate what's going on a lot better. And the artwork and characters are just perfect cartooning. Like, it's truly what you see in what made Robert Crumb a master cartoonist. So now, like I said, Robert Crumb did not like that movie. He was not a big fan of the Fritz the Cat, the movie. So he did this last story, and this last story is the death of Fritz the Cat. Now, that's not a spoiler, because the book is literally called The Life and Death of Fritz the Cat. But he wanted to kill off the character, so that he never had to hear from him or see about him ever again. There was a follow-up movie, and I'm not sure if that came out after this strip or not. But this strip does come out after the Ralph Bakshi movie. Ralph Bakshi and Robert Crumb, neither of them had anything to do with the sequel. But you see in here, Fritz the Cat becomes a celebrity after the movie. He's literally talking about the movie itself. He's even goes on to a talk show where he's talking to Johnny Giraffe about his experience with the movie. He's having issues with getting old. He's still running around trying to find different ladies. That's not any different at all. But then he meets his ultimate demise. Now I'm going to flip to the last page. If you want to avoid spoilers, skip ahead like 10 seconds in the video. But he gets ice picked to the back of the head and violence in the media. And that's it. That's his last frame. That's the last panel of Fritz the Cat. And then there's no back matter after that. But really, really a fun read. Especially if you're into anthropomorphic characters. You want to see some great cartooning. You want to see the progression of an artist over the first decade of the career, where they make the largest leap in talent, and just also if you're into like funny like Adult Swim, adult animated movies, adult animated cartoons or whatever, this is right up your alley as well. Can't recommend this enough. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Again, this is Taylor Talks Comics. Give the video a thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. And I go live every Wednesday at noon Eastern for a live show. You can join us there. If you can't join us live, those videos are always available on replay under the live tab of my channel. And most importantly, keep talking comics.